Rum Podcast presents Suspiria. Hey guys, welcome back to the Blood and Black Rum Podcast. I'm Ryne from Cultsploitation.com, and I'm joined with my co-host Martin.
How's it going?
Pretty good. It's been a couple weeks since we did our last episode. And last time, after Avengers Infinity War, we said that we were going to do a horror movie this time. And we're kind of back to our Italian horror roots here. We're named after Blood and Black Lace, and we've actually never done that film before. But we have done a couple of giallos, and today's episode isn't really what I would classify as a giallo film. Even though, because of the director Dario Argento, that has often come under fire as people try to claim that it's a giallo film. To me, it doesn't really matter what you call it, but we are doing Argento's Suspiria.
Well, what's the point of having labels, Ryan, if you
don't follow the rules?
If you're not going to exactly.
Yeah. Well, the rule is, for this, at least, for giallo, that you have a... there's a couple of tropes to giallo. Gialli, actually, if you're going to go with the Italian plural form, gialli. The rule, basically, is that you have sort of a POV killer.
And someone uses a razor.
I guess...
I want to see what killer films throughout the world are like. In America, it's always like some kind of like butcher knife or a cleaver.
Big knife.
Yeah. Something you'd see in like an Emerald Lagasse set. In Italy, it's good old-timey razors.
Everybody who's running around with good old-timey razors.
Like what's it in Germany? What's it in like China and Japan?
Like the creamy films. Actually, probably knives, I would say. Nothing too extravagant, I don't think. No one's running around with...
trying to think of something
like a bayonet or something. Or something like Germany bayonet.
I'm thinking more like just like something like totally random. Because like to me, a razor, it is practical, but...
Yeah, at the time, I'm sure most Italian men were carrying like straight razors around in their back pockets just because they're hairy men.
Just brush it off.
Never know when you need a nice trim on the beard.
I'm just thinking like, I'm having a hard time trying to think of like just like a common like random just like thing that's sharp, but you wouldn't think like, oh, I could use this to kill somebody with.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't think of anything either right now. Razor probably is the most common like utilized thing. I guess you could do like scissors. Like maybe after you're done with your arts and crafts in Germany, you're running around with some scissors in your back pocket. Don't run with them. It's a bad idea.
A trowel.
Yeah.
Whole one just dedicated to, they like saw
like the German Three Little Pigs building their house, and then you got your trowel.
I say Norwegian slashers. You use a trowel because somebody saw Night of the Living Dead. And like, that's a great idea.
Trowel weapon works. I think that would work. But anyway, giallo films. So we have that slasher trope of like a POV killer, and then also like the black gloves. Big trope of having like that POV where you see the black leather gloves slipped on. This is basically the OJ driving gloves.
I one day wish to be rich enough to have a nice enough car where I could feel like I could be a pair of driving gloves.
Just like basically like because all these people in these giallo films are running around with leather driving gloves. They obviously are driving nice cars.
Even by the 70s. That's like an antiquated concept. Like, oh, I'm going to...
Yeah, put on my driving gloves. Yeah, it was more like a 50s and 60s thing of like, gotta protect the hands. Moisturizer's hard to come by right now.
You don't want to know what my Jaguar's steering wheel's made out of. I can't possibly,
Sharp objects on it. Yeah, I don't know the whole reasoning behind having driving gloves.
It makes sense if like you're a race car driver because you're sweating at the knuckles, so
you're sweating,
especially in time
vibrations. I guess
this is before power steerings.
Yeah,
is really common.
True.
So you're gonna have a good grip on the wheel. So it makes sense if you're like a race car driver. But if you're just like
you don't want them to fall off or something while you're in the middle of a turn. But yeah, like it's almost like. Driving gloves are, to me, like, something unnecessary because if you think about other things that you put gloves on for, how about, like, batting gloves? Yeah, you want to wear batting gloves because the wooden bat vibrates, like, hell, and it fucking hurts when it vibrates, but hopefully your car's not doing that. Otherwise, you need to go get an alignment or something.
I would say, to me, it's just the epitome of opulent.
Pretty much.
Like, I have money, and I got,
yeah, maybe at a certain point in the 70s, it was just, like, doing it to, like, make your neighbors annoyed.
Just
like, they don't have a nice car, so I'm going to... Hold on. Hey, George, let me just slip on the driving gloves.
Going out for a ride, Not going anywhere in particular, just going to, take a drive.
Take a little drive off. Yeah, no, it does seem like opulence to the extreme for that, but that was the thing with Giallo. And so when we're talking about Suspiria, Dario Argento's 1977, what I would call an opus for him, although he did have quite a few other films before this and then after that were also pretty inspirational besides Suspiria. But this film is not, I don't consider it, and many don't consider it, a Giallo film. And would you care to take a gander as to the reasoning behind that?
Probably because there's not enough story to go on to connect like an actual killer.
Yeah, I mean,
it's all...
I would say that, well, it's part of it is that, we do see the killer from time, a killer from time to time. But the biggest thing is that this is more of a supernatural film. It's not as much a like what we would consider a slasher.
And I would almost say calling it a supernatural film is also being very forgiving.
I guess we'll get into that in a little bit.
Very generous.
I mean, but it is though. Like it's not. It doesn't center around like this one specific murderer that's running around and doing all of these murders. For the most part, we see a whole variety of different things happening, and so it's more along the lines of like paranormal / supernatural in a way that doesn't really fit alongside the regular Giallo format.
Well, as we've reviewed in I would say the other Argento film that I've at least seen that's more paranormal than is Giallo with Phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
Even the phenomena in this film, just like in Phenomena, don't really make any fucking sense.
True. I mean,
they're just kind of there to get to make things kind of
that's
slightly tie together, so you can at the end of the day say there is a narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's partly what Argento does, and then partly also a lot of his motifs is just that it's more of an art than a basic storytelling element. Like, if we're talking about some of the other films that he does, like opera, there's an art to opera as well, in that it tries to reenact a story of an opera or tell it in that sort of style.
I'm not disagreeing with those ideas. I know, the only Argento films I've seen are the ones we've done for the podcast. So if you want to know my views of him as a director, you can watch our Argento review. I mean, listen to our Argento reviews and listen to this one. And I understand that. I understand that on the spectrum of filmmaking, if you had like one extreme is just total visuals, and the other extreme is like totally narrative driven. A totally narrative driven. I'm trying to think of like a really narrative driven director. It's kind of hard because a lot of great directors find the great balance between narrative and visual. I would say Argento is totally on the visual side.
Yeah.
He's very interested in the visual and not the narrative, and the art form of expressing the vision that he sees in his head and putting it on film. I would say Leone too, but not nearly as much as Argento. At least his films have a well-grounded narrative. They're not the most in-depth narratives, but there's enough there that you can follow what's going on, but he's definitely also more interested in like visual storytelling. I guess I would say like Spielberg would be like more interested in the narrative. He's more interested in like the whimsy. Like when he's making like his just like regular box office films, when he's not trying to go for like an Academy Award. He's more like focused on like narrative and whimsy than he is like the actual cinematography and the visual aspect of the film.
Yeah, I think I agree with that comparing them on the opposite spectrum, you have Spielberg, who's much more narratively driven, and then you have Argento, who's more artfully driven, where the story takes a back seat. And I think
Kubrick, I would say, is like the perfect balance. True. Like, he's very, visually driven, but his films also have a very, besides, Eyes Wide Shut, his films are also very well put together narratively.
If we're talking Kubrick, you see a lot of similar elements to Argento's Suspiria in The Shining.
Yes.
And
all the red in this film was making me think, the very famous, blood coming down the hallway and the.
Yeah, it's the aesthetic to this, and even sometimes the framing and the atmospheric shots of actual buildings, are very much in line with Kubrick's The Shining, and
which I'm sure he probably did see Suspiria.
Yeah,
I could because he's he liked film as an art form.
Well, I'm sure.
So I'm sure he probably knew what was going on in Italy during the time, especially because he was living in London, in England.
I'm sure he had some familiarity with it when he made it. To the point where I don't think it really influenced him as a filmmaker to make The Shining, but you definitely see those similarities, and especially a lot of people have played with color, but Suspiria takes it to a whole other level. I mean, it really is a film that revolves around color. It's almost like watching it through a prism or something. You're holding a prism up to your eye, and then you're watching a film behind it.
It's literally the Technicolor.
Yeah, it really is.
It's red, blue, and green, and how it's literally taking that. Let's see how vibrant we can get those colors for this film.
So, before we take our little break and do our beer talk before getting into Suspiria, I'll leave everybody on the edge of their seat with one question that you can only answer with one word right now. Did you like Suspiria? One word. You got one word. You can't elaborate on what you're saying. You get one word.
You'll find out.
No, you can't.
No.
You can't. Did you say no, you didn't like it, or no, you're not going to?
I'm not going to. We'll have to wait.
All right, fine, whatever. You really left on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to,
listen
through the beer talk if they don't want to, and tune back in 20 minutes. No. All right.
Who knows?
All right.
Maybe I liked it. Maybe I didn't.
I guess you're going to leave it as clickbait. That's fine with me. All right. We'll move on to beer talk here because Martin doesn't want to play along. Today we have a new beer that we've never had. The brewery.
I don't know why you also say that we have a new beer. Have we ever done
Yeah, we've done a couple where we revisit a beer, but for the most part we have a new beer for sure.
Always.
But this one really truly is a new beer because we've never had Sixpoint Brewery on the show ever. First of all, Sixpoint's not really a common beer that you find around here that much.
Well, I do love that you said that we haven't had it on the show. I feel like we invited them into studio. Hey guys, we got
come on in, guys. Yeah, it's like Cribs style podcasting.
Yeah.
Come on in, check out what's in the fridge, make yourselves at home.
We'll talk about your beer now. Yeah, but no, they are based in New York City.
I know, which is weird because I just feel like Sixpoint's not that readily available around where we are.
And they got it wrong. It's the 5 points. Have you seen Gangs in New York? Come on.
True. I don't know that much about Sixpoint, to be honest with you, just because I haven't had that much. I think I have had a couple of their beers, and that couple would be including this one, because I can't even name the other one that I've had. It was probably just a very quick, maybe I had it at a bar or something. But, so I've never really had Sixpoint before, but we have the Citrus Jammer on the show today. And the Citrus Jammer is, I think, a take on their regular Jammer. Is that I think that's how it works.
I
I think they have a regular jammer, and this one is a citrus jammer because it adds the Gose style to this. And I always say Gose, and I realize that that's not the correct way to say it. But I don't care. That's how I'm saying it.
Why? How's it supposed to be said?
Gose is the correct terminology, but I don't like it, so I don't say it that way. Actually, it's Gose. I made it into Gose.
Gozar?
I made it into French when I said Gose, like a nice rosé. But
I am the gatekeeper. You're the key master.
It's Gose, and I don't like saying it that way, so I'm just going to keep mispronouncing it as Gose. But, so citrus jammers, they're Gose style. And it is a 4% alcohol beer with sea salt, and I like how the can states this in a very, like, non-specific way. Citrus added. But I believe that the actual citrus that they add is lime. So this is, I think, a very medium style Gose. It's not super tart or sour. It just has like a nice snap at the end, I would say. So those of us who really like enjoy a super sour Gose may be disappointed with the sort of mild flavors that come across from this citrus jammer, but I think what really comes out is the citrus itself, like the lime taste, and the sea salt, which does give it a nice, I don't know, like pop to it. It really makes me smack my tongue. It's almost like a style of margarita, like a beer Rita, but done well, not like Bud Light.
They have a fruit Rita for everything now. Lime-a-rita, peach-a-rita.
This reminds me of a margarita, but just it doesn't have the sometimes like what some people might think of as the problematic taste of tequila. Because I know there are a lot of people who do not really like tequila. Do you like tequila?
No.
Oh, you don't like tequila?
No.
So definitely a lot of people have a difficult time with tequila. And so this kind of eliminates the tequila flavor from a margarita. And so you get the rest of what the margarita would be, which would be the lime.
4% alcohol.
The lime flavor, the citrus flavor. The other thing that this does really well from the perspective of someone who wants a margarita, but they don't want like any of the actual ingredients in a margarita, this citrus jammer has a nice, balanced flavor to it that I think works really well.
And I'm not a Gose person myself, as said several times in the podcast when we've done these type of beers, but I do like this one quite a bit. I do like that it's not that tart. I did make my typical, as Ryan can attest to, sucking on a lemon face when I had my first sip of it. But after that, I got accustomed to it pretty quick, and I enjoyed it. It was pretty good. I like that it is like on like a lime. The saltiness does add like a nice pop to it, as you said, and it's as your new favorite verb for beer. Not verb, adjective. It's crushable.
Yeah, that is my new favorite.
It's literally, to me, it's basically kind of like Dogfish Head's Sea Quench, which is also like black lime and sea salt, which I thought was pretty damn good. So
I actually didn't have that one because you got it yourself.
I just got a single, yeah. And I did like that a lot. That's a little bit more stronger. It's a little bit more citrusy and more salty too, but I did think that was really good. So this is a really refreshing beer. On like a nice hot day like it has been today, this would be a nice beer to have.
Yeah, it's sessionable at 4%. It's really,
you mean crushable?
Yeah, crushable. It's just an easy drinking beer, and I think that a lot of people, even people who don't really like Gose,
it'd be one like I'd say like give it a shot.
Yeah, especially if you're like you're not really sure about Gose, you never really had them before. One to try out and see, if you want to move into like the more extreme areas of Gose. So, good beer.
Still no Jenny Ruby Red Kolsch.
It's not, but
which I had to go and change my rating on Untapped.
Gave it 5.
Yeah, I mean I can't delete the first one. See, that's what I gotta do. I gotta wait. When I start rating things on Untapped, I gotta wait to get through the beer and fully process it. I don't know why I gave it a 4.5 because that thing it's a 5,
straight up 5.
No questions asked.
Both of them are crushable though. Citrus Jammer and
I know, but I'm gonna be sad when that Ruby Red Kolsch is gone.
Yeah.
Like at this point, it's like, hey, Oktoberfest is coming.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm gonna be like, what
date is it? May 16th. Yeah, Oktoberfest probably coming around in a couple months.
I would say on Facebook Jenny just posted like it's so good and so delicious and it's not even summer yet. I'm like you don't be saying you're getting rid of this soon. Please don't.
I'm sure
not like this. You can wait. You know what? Their Oktoberfest can wait till October. That's how good this Ruby Red Kolsch is.
Hopefully. All right, you ready to get into Suspiria?
I guess.
In depth?
I guess.
Because you don't seem that excited about it. I don't know why.
Because I'm saving it for when
we actually get into it.
To the meat and potatoes.
Right.
Right now we're at our chef salads part with a little bit of balsamic vinegar. We just finished that up. Cleansing the palate with some lemon sorbet. We're at a fancy restaurant.
I guess this podcast is turned into Cooking with Martin.
Yeah. And now we're getting into,
the main entree, the main dish.
Your steak, potato, and vegetables.
All right, well, let's start with the steak. Let's try to summarize this plot as best as possible. Because you say it was a very limited one.
Yeah.
So go ahead, try to sum it up here. Give us the gist of the plot for Suspiria. If for people who don't know, after 40 years of this film, people who don't know the plot yet.
So, the plot of Suspiria is a American girl is going to a German ballet academy, and strange shit happens there, and some people die. And then we take an hour and 40 minutes to get to the why that happens, and it's just kind of thrown upon you. So, all the weird things that happen, there's a reason. 5 pages of script.
Well, that's not true, because as we've seen in this film, which has an English dub to it, there's quite a lot of dialogue. It's not that great of dialogue, and it's not delivered.
Rapid fire. Yeah. It's rapid fire. Not only is it rapid fire, it's so
to the point, here's exposition.
Blunt. Yeah. Yes, oh, yes, yeah, you're from here, and you come from here, and you do this, and yes, that's how, oh, and that happened, yes, I'll call it right away. The one scene where the headmistress is talking to her about the weird things, and she's saying, oh, I heard these words that she said, iris and secret, but I don't know what it means. She's like, oh, you didn't say that. Call the police right now. She just literally picks up the phone, there's no, brevity or anything, or let that whole part breathe out. Nope, she's like, oh, call the police right now.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to, I should say favorite in that you can see the problems with the dub is that when Susie is actually on the phone with Udo Kier's character, Dr. Mandel, who is the psychiatrist that Sarah's been talking to. She's talking to him on the phone and really not giving him any time to respond. Because you can't hear his side of the conversation on the phone. So she's saying things like, hi, this is Susie. Yes, Sarah's friend. Oh, I'd like to meet with you. Oh, yeah, that sounds great. And it's just a rapid fire conversation she's having with herself where he has no chance to actually respond to it. So there are a lot of scenes like that.
And as we see in the one scene that he's in before that, where he's just walking around drinking a glass of red wine in a regular pint glass for some reason. I don't know. That's very faux pas. And I'm not even a wino. But anyway.
I don't think so. Not in Italy, that's not faux pas.
Well, anywho.
The tall glasses
Point is, he was a very talkative man, that scene. That 4 minutes he gets on the screen, he's very talkative.
Basically reading a Wikipedia entry about witches.
Yeah. So, it's hard to believe in that phone call, he's just like, yeah.
Well, I'm going to try to go a little bit further here and give a bit more context on Suspiria. I think you're right, though, by saying that the plot is very limited here. And the reasoning for that is because this is the first of the Mother trilogy that Dario Argento works on. And so I think that the idea is not as fleshed out as Argento makes it to be in Inferno. So the sequel is Infernal, comes after this, and we really get more information about Suspiria in that film than we do in this one. It's almost, as I said, I was talking to you, it's almost like in Halloween, where in Halloween we really don't have a motive that much for Michael Myers following Jamie Lee Curtis. And then once we get to Halloween 2, there's more of a motive there. There's more information that we get.
The difference is, though, Loomis gives enough subtext to where you don't need to know. The fact that he just says he's the boogeyman, he's pure evil. It's basic. It's not anything like thought-provokingly in-depth. But it's all you need to know. It's like, and then you can let your mind kind of wander and fill in the blanks. It's a metaphor nightmare throughout the film. Supernatural aspect of the witches is tacked on in the last 20 minutes. Well, so just so like, what the fuck's been going on becomes like, oh, this is why it's kind of going on, and
we'll talk about that. I want to talk about that in a second, but I want to kind of disagree with you on that point of that it differs that much from Halloween, because it doesn't. I think that your boogeyman example of what Loomis says is actually present in Suspiria as well, in that in this case, when we meet with Udo Kier's character, he basically says the same thing about boogeymen, except for this case is Helena Marcos, who is supposedly basically a black magic witch.
We don't see her until the last 5 minutes.
That's okay, though.
The difference is in Halloween, Michael Myers is a...
Helena Marcos throughout the film, too. Just in, not in explicit detail, but we... in the circular, sheet fortress that of maggots. So we do see Helena Marcos as well there.
But it's a silhouette, though, and you don't know that until the end. So, I mean, but what's a visually striking scene, and, done well, visually and through the score and the tension it builds. Again, narratively, it's weak. So I get what you're saying. Like yeah, she's there, and but again, it's like you don't know that until the end, and it's like, oh, and you don't really want to have like a kind of aha moment where it's because it's exposition dump that's solves what's going on. Which is what this film has. Exposition dumps. So you want that aha moment for you to figure it out, not the film to tell you. That's why I think, again, narratively, this film is weak.
I think that Dario Argento doesn't do a good job of info dumps. And part of that is the viewer to see things happening in the background. They saw it happening but didn't know what it was. So when you think about it, I believe that the intention here is really to make the audience feel like the one woman that we see most often, which would be Joan Bennett's character, the older lady that has been ushering Susie around and trying to make her stay in the dormitory, that she is really the immediate threat, and the headmistress is kind of just off to the side. And then once you get to the end of the film, you realize, okay, well, more so it's the headmistress who is the head of this coven. And so as they refer to it during that exposition dump, she's the head of the scorpion. If you cut off that head, then the rest of the coven will wither and die. So I think there is some of that of Dario Argento going on, of trying to displace what would actually be the main threat in the film. And we see that quite a bit of Argento putting things in the background of the film that will then come out later on, that we actually see as that is part of the main purpose of why we saw it originally. And I want to one of those things is when Susie is in her room and she shares a bathroom with Sarah across the way. So Sarah at one point just goes into the bathroom and turns on the light. That turning on of the light is signaling later on that the rest of the coven is searching for Sarah when they go into the bathroom, and she sees them in the bathroom later on. So a lot of those things that are taking place in the background are kind of ingeniously worked into the film later on as sort of a foreshadowing element. Or the other thing that we see it very clearly is the film's final iris sequence where she turns the iris, the blue iris, that she's known about since the beginning of a secret iris somewhere in the building, but we don't really know what that means or where that is. Well, we've seen the iris room. We've seen that exact room. We've seen the layout. We've seen the red, yellow, and blue irises. But the thing is, we just never really put that together. And they pretty much ingeniously hide that door frame, I think, very well within that room, where you can't really tell that there is a secret seam there that leads to another passageway. So I think in a lot of ways that Argento's purpose here, while yes, he is forced to dump exposition and dialogue format, he's also hiding in plain sight some of the other sequences that we'll see later on in the film as foreshadowing. I don't know if that makes it better for you, but
I'm not disagreeing with that, because I think, as we'll talk about in a minute, about like the aesthetics of the film, I'm just saying, as a plot overall, it's a very weak plot.
I think a lot of people have agreed with that, for sure.
And granted, from the other films I've seen, obviously writing is not, strong suit. Just look at Phenomenon, where that goes down.
Yeah. I mean, and that the other thing is, to be fair, it's presumed that Argento, while he worked on the screenplay, he wasn't really the main writer on this. It was actually Dario Argento, the main person who came up with the idea or the story. A storyline that was originally a book series, but really didn't have the ideas for the film, but he helped flesh it out as writing it. So yeah, I think there is some truth to that he doesn't have a great handle on actually how to write a film or how to write dialogue. And
it makes me think, like, what did he contribute to Once Upon a Time in the West? What was his, because he gets screenwriting credit for it. So it's like, what the fuck did he do for that film?
Right. Yeah, I think and you're not the only one to point out that Suspiria does have some problematic elements to it. One of which is that it's slow. It is, for an hour and 40-minute film, it is fairly slow. It doesn't, though it has tense sequences, I think that it does have a plotting pace that doesn't really pick up until maybe the last 30 minutes, 20 minutes even, of the film, where it actually really starts to pick up the pace and moving towards the end.
But at the same time, I will say, I think the plotting pace does work for this film, because I think it has to get what it's trying to get out of, from the audience. It's going to require slowly, building to this big crescendo, not, moving at a breakneck speed. Even though I think when they do, so the film is slow and plotting, but when it comes to the dialogue scenes where they're just dumping exposition, they blow through that, because again, he's not interested in the words and the actual narrative that's being told. He wants to tell it visually. That's why I was saying earlier, I think he's, again, a visual director. Not like that, when you were saying, like, there's things in the scene that are being shot that foreshadow what's going to happen. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing with how well that's done. I'm just saying, as a narrative structure, it's weak narratively. And I think, again, the plotting slowness of how he kind of draws the scenes out of, like, Susie walking down the hallway and the colors and how they all, that's all, that's the whole different topic when you talk about the actual aesthetics of the film and how that lends, lends to the whole thing.
It would have been interesting to see how Suspiria played out as sort of like a dialogue-less film. Because I think in some ways it could work without that dialogue too, as like you said, like a nightmare of just seeing it almost in... Now, I'm not saying silence, like, because I think the Goblin score is super important to this film, but just the lack of, like, a dialogue or exposition to help guide the viewer, and so they're kind of stuck in this nightmare with Susie Bannion. And in some ways, we are stuck in the nightmare with Susie, I think Argento does want us to be almost as clueless as Susie is in a lot of ways. Though he does switch back and forth between character POVs and things like that, for the most part, a lot of it is shot where we're sort of in the shoes of Susie. There's one scene where he actually shows her picking up a glass of wine, and then when it transitions back to with her drinking it, she's actually drinking it into the camera. So again, it's sort of like we're meant to be a part of that whole Susie's narrative, really. So we're kind of as clueless as Susie is as to what's going on. And I don't think that makes things better, like when you talk about the plotting and narrative storytelling ability from Argento, but I think it does in some ways help put us into like the surreality of Suspiria's own world. Because it does, in a lot of ways, seem like it's its own world outside of what's happening in the real world. Do you want to? I mean, we've kind of talked a lot about just like the plot and the flaws in it, but do you want to talk about how the aesthetics actually go along with the plot, or help or hinder the plot? I don't know how you feel, but help or hinder the plot in some way. So yeah, I know you said there's a lot of about the aesthetics that you actually wanted to speak to.
No,
you don't want to go into it.
Yeah, no, we'll go into it. So yeah, I think aesthetically, cinematography, and just the way the entire film is shot, that's what makes this film worth watching. I think the use of color in this film, and I'm not just going to be saying anything new or revolutionary. Film's 40 years old. I'm sorry,
yeah, right.
But I do think it's really good and really cool how it's used and how different colors kind of signify different like tones and emotion that's going on in the film. When like scenes are vibrant red, there's like a tension. When they're like vibrant blue, it's like a calming moment, and there's yellow moments where they use more yellow and sometimes green, but it's mainly like red and blue are the two main ones that get used, and it's really nice. Film has a lot of symmetry in it, and the way all the sets are set up and designed, everything is symmetrical. Like it was like amazing, just like watching the tracking shots down the hallway, whether they be POV or just like the camera going down a hallway and seeing how like every 5 feet there's like a candle on the wall in each spot, and they're all the same. And there's set tables, and they're all the same patterns. These elaborate, ornate patterns that are on the wall and with vibrant colors, and they're all, again, it's all symmetrical. It's all the same. It all connects and flows. Yeah, it's really cool. It's as I joked with you, I said like whoever designed this place, like in this world, like that fucking interior designer had to have gotten paid a fucking fortune. Because it's like, you want me to do what?
Yeah.
Have these like overlapping fish pattern that also looks like birds and what? With the all right, fine. It'll take
like Dali abstraction. Yeah. I think you're right with the symmetry in it. It does, and it's also noticeable when he breaks from the symmetry too, because often that symmetry is broken in violent ways to signify either the tension of the scene or within the actual action of the scene. And a lot of times too, that symmetry is kind of literally shattered, because we see a couple different things shattering in this film. Glass shattering, breaking through windows.
That's how you also know is it a giallo. Someone gets, shattered, shards of glass are used as a weapon and throwing people. Which that was kind of funny, that first girl that gets killed, and he like smashes her head up against the window, and they're showing her like face getting like just pressed like, Ugh!
Little window face.
Yeah,
smushed. Yes, that is. I mean, I think though that scene in itself really sets you up for it, because at that point we're not even in the Tam dance hall. At that point, the studio, we're in a different building, but still, it's very, very elaborate, and you get to see like it really cues you in first off to like what's going to be happening in this film. You see the elaborate red walls, the patterning. You get to see.
And I thought at first too that was the ballet.
Yeah, it's a little confusing there at the beginning.
Because like I said, like both buildings are like vibrant red color, and they look similar. So I thought it was just kind of like a cordon off section of.
And again too, that I think it adds to the surreality of the situations is that within Argento's world here in Suspiria, things kind of swap around a little bit. Like their movements are out of place. They're not really, it's not like you see a tracking shot like her walking from the TAM building to this new apartment. It's more so like you see her running through woods and then all of a sudden she's at this other building.
Yeah.
It's sort of a surreal moment, like in a nightmare, where you might be in one spot and then all of a sudden you're somewhere else. And it adds to that surrealness of, being there. Other people might call it continuity error, or just like not a lack of attention to detail. But it also just adds to the surreal atmosphere of the whole film, of the moodiness, and you never really know what's going to happen. I think that the big atmosphere, though, is just all of the settings. You're right, that the symmetry, the settings, the colors. I love the red colors for sure, but I also love like some of the other elements that seep into this, like the green that's very limitedly used. And the green always gets me because the green happens when they turn out the lights. And it's like, oh yeah, thank God the green backup generator lights came on. Because again, the color in this really forces the viewer to, I guess, suspend their disbelief, because how often are you going to go to sleep in like this circular quarantine room with like red lighting glowing all over you?
You'd be like, oh, I'm trying to sleep. Like, yeah, you can't sleep because the fucking room's like blood red.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
No one's waking up like, what's going on? Why is,
Why is the red floodlights on? Yeah, I know. That does force you to suspend belief a little bit, but
and that's where and also too, I think it goes with, at least for me, it goes with the whole it being a nightmare motif, because a lot of the bad things that happen are when Susie's in the middle of like, she's sleeping and she's like, mumbling, and it's all like so it's like, to me it kind of comes across like she's having the nightmares, and the nightmares are playing out within that whole studio and like what's happening. So that being the phenomena of the film.
Interestingly, like some elements in film historians have noted that the biggest thing that signals like this is becoming a nightmare is that initial sequence of Susie getting off the plane and being in the airport. Because when there's that first scene where she's walking towards the exit of the airport and the doors keep opening. And so as she's walking and she sees the doors open, Goblin soundtrack comes in, the Suspiria theme. But after that, once the doors close and you see Susie's face again, the theme stops. So you're kind of, there's that judder of hearing the theme and then not hearing it. And that was
very jarring for the first 5 seconds of the film. It's me like, walking around and like, wah, 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 wah.
Yeah. Because how often do you have like a soundtrack that like just stops at random like every 5 seconds? It's not that often.
Italian films.
Right. But what it seems to signify is that opening of the door, she's stepping into this nightmare world, this different world from the one that she's used to.
Hence the torrential downpours that never end.
Hence the very trope-ish storm that is taking place outside. The thunder and light. It was a dark and stormy night.
Why can't they have it one day just be like, it was a hot, nice
It was a really hot day, and
like a nice just summer day, 75. People weren't sweating, it's just a really good day, and then just shit happens.
Crickets are chirping.
Yeah.
Very nice old time. Mm-hmm. But I think, the atmosphere is really important to this film, and I think even if you can't really get down with the whole mother thing, which isn't really fleshed out in this film, Mater Suspiriorum, doesn't really get a name or anything like that. It's basically just Helena Marcos as a witch.
Yeah, you can't use other films that aren't in the continuity,
right?
That weren't even.
Yeah, that's
I wouldn't tell you to be like, if you watched, because originally the first Star Wars, no matter what Lucas says, he probably didn't have Empire Return in his head and all that shit. That's why, when it first came out, it's just Star Wars, not Episode 4.
Right.
So, you can't, like, if you're watching A New Hope, the original Star Wars in a vacuum, you can't be like, well, in context, if you've seen Empire and this and all, kind of... makes sense. And it's like, no, because this film was made in a vacuum.
Right.
So, everything else is consequential. Just it kind of adds on to it. So it's like the same thing with Suspiria.
I totally agree. I mean, you can't. I can't say that Argento at this point was truly working off of like his Three Mothers trilogy. I don't think that it comes out enough to really say with Suspiria that like Inferno was coming next and it was going to be the second part of the Three Mothers. I think in Inferno,
I'll say that it takes him 25 years to make the third one. So
yeah, in Inferno, he did at least at that point structure it a little bit more narratively. That Mater Suspiriorum was the first mother. In Inferno, Mater Tenebrarum I think it's in that one. I can't remember which mother it is. It's in that one, but that would be the second mother. And he kind of structures that a little bit more than what we get from Suspiria, which isn't that much. We don't know about three other mothers. We only know about this one mother that leads the coven. And even then, she's not really referred to as a mother. She's more referred to as the Black Queen or Helena Marcos or the headmistress. And so you are left with sort of a very limited understanding of what's going on. And I think, too, an interesting element of Suspiria, I'm not saying this is good, I'm not saying it's bad, is that it's one of those films that almost lacks a theme. Like, if you try to think hard about the thematic, like the overall overarching metaphor or theme about this film, it's very difficult to come up with one specifically that you can use within the film's context to like elaborate on.
Wear a bra.
Right, wear a bra. Otherwise, you get killed by a coven of witches.
Yeah.
I think the biggest one, and it doesn't come out that well, the biggest one, or not the biggest one, but one of the ones that you can think of, is that as a whole, we are smaller than our environment, than the things that are happening around us, is a big one. Because there's a lot of those sequences where the ethereal is kind of acting on the small, insignificant creatures within. One of the biggest elements scenes that happens in is when the blind piano player is walking his dog through a very deserted
city square,
German square, and the buildings around him are sort of looming, and intentionally he is made to seem very, very small and insignificant in comparison to those gigantic buildings. And then the ethereal nature of that is that you kind of see the creature. You don't get to see it, but it's sort of like a winged creature that's flying through. That's almost meant to resemble witches as the shadows kind of play on the buildings. But it's very ethereal in that he can't see it. I mean, he's blind. Obviously, he can't see it, but he can sense it, and we can't see it, but we know it's there. It's a very atmospheric thing that's like, you are smaller than...
They use the camera to,
Exactly, yeah.
To show that,
there's a scale there that's like, you are smaller than the things that are working and happening around you. But other than that, I've heard it called, from critics, a coming-of-age story, which I completely disagree with. I don't believe that...
It's just like Stand By Me.
Right,
The Goonies.
I'll say that I definitely disagree with it being called a coming of age story.
She already is of age.
Yeah, by the time we get to Susie Bannion, she's of age. The only thing
that she was bitching about how she didn't she didn't want to be in the boarding school.
The only thing you can really say with that, like a coming of age story, is that she's kind of bullied by other girls her age, but it's not even really a significant impact on the story.
No, because it doesn't bother her.
Right.
Because they did the whole, the one girl, Olga, was like, oh, I heard, people who have the name that start with an S are snakes. And she gets a tiff with another girl, Sarah, who's that, and she's upset by that, but Susie's like, I don't care.
Yeah,
it does.
I completely disagree with that. I don't think it's a coming of age story at all. The other very, very minor theme that it has to do with money. And I don't think it's fleshed out enough where you can really draw a conclusion about it, except for the fact that everybody at the beginning of the film is completely obsessed with money. And that's really all that you get from it, is that perhaps it's a story on greed, in that you will go so far with a witch to get what you want, but there's not really enough there to Yeah. It's a very, very, tenebrous connection to...
I'm going to go with Nightmare.
Yeah. The easiest one to say is that
I don't remember. I'm a person who I will never remember my dreams. I don't ever remember my dreams. I don't ever remember my nightmares. I don't. I'll wake up and I'll have it in my head for like a second and then it's gone. And I'm like, I can't remember, what the hell that was all about. So it's, even like, somebody who just talks to people who, talks about their dreams and nightmares. This is what this film feels like every time. Not the parts where like it's daylight and they're having conversation, doing the ballet school and dancing, but anytime it becomes night, it's the sleeping hours, witching hours, things become more like lucid and dreamlike, because again, that's when the colors come in, the use of color and the shots that kind of...
That's when the green generators come on.
The shots that kind of exacerbate and show the overall sets and how big and large and well put together, like how they're all put together, and that to me is like the theme that I get is just like the
general nightmare.
Yeah, just like the all, it's just things that are kind of like like it's all lucid, like it's just a nightmare, and it's lucid the entire way through.
I think it's safe to leave it at that. It's just interesting that it doesn't really ever come to a, like an overarching theme. Like, if you think about most films, in some way, there is a final metaphor that you get from it, sort of like fable-like. But in this film, you really don't get one, especially because of the abrupt ending. That it just is kind of like Susie Bannion. Even the whole lead up, there's not really even a lead up to the climax. It's more just like Susie's figuring out things, like the number of steps it takes to get to the main, like the secret room. And then she finds it. Then she finds the mother. And then she vanquishes the mother. And then the whole building falls down and burns up. And that's it.
It becomes a Metroid endgame escape.
That is funny.
Planet Zeb's like,
I would love to see a video of just like them putting like the Metroid timer on there.
Warning, ballet school about to explode. You have 3 minutes.
Because that is effectively what happens in this, and that is one thing that I really find impressive about the whole film. Throughout the whole film, besides the lighting, is that last sequence where everything is crumbling and falling down. Because they did a pretty good job of having things explode and blow up, that's a really cool moment, just of like everything that's happening at one time. And it's a precursor to like how we do it now. Obviously, we could do it through CGI, we could do it through elaborate stunts and mechanisms and things like that. But at that time, it was a little bit more difficult to rig up all this stuff, and especially having like Jessica Harper in there as all this glass shit is exploding. I thought it was, and dropping from the ceiling too. I thought that was pretty impressive, especially for 1977. So we haven't really talked much about the actual gore in the film. So what did you think about that whole? Because in general, this film has been known to be fairly gory and like almost like in a, I would say, it's like a sexy way almost. And that it's kind of like at the forefront of the film, and it's stylish. It's like the violence is meant to be stylish for like the reasoning behind the surrealism of the film. What did you think about that?
It's the blood is very hyper colorized.
Yeah, like super vibrant.
I do love how like the blood is like a very vibrant red. It's not like in Dawn of the Dead where it's almost like pink, like pinkish blue, like how vibrant the red is.
Right.
I do think like this is like, again, kind of goes more for like the whole nightmare dream aspect of it. Like it's just the way it's, color and stylized, very, fits with the whole theme. Same thing with like the way people die, the whole, the whole beginning where you have the one girl, getting like kind of almost like dragged through the window, but not quite. It's almost like a Freddy type thing.
Yeah, like a hairy arm that comes out,
coming through, and then how he stabs her over and over again. It's just like, she's a tough son of a bitch. Like, she's just taking the, should be dead. He's like, nope. But what really ties that whole part, together and makes it very, really cool is how, the head like smashes through the stained glass, and it's just kind of sitting there, and then the whole body drops through on a
that's a pretty cool moment there. Where the head comes through, and you're kind of just like staring up at the head
because the other girl's just standing there screaming for her life, not doing anything productive to try to get out of the situation.
I mean, it becomes
but it does make for a really cool moment of just
it's a really elaborate like setup that you have to have. You have this girl who's getting killed up above on the stained glass window, and then this woman down below, and eventually it's like a Final Destination moment later on where the window falls through, and you just have her
impales her
also like displayed and impaled on with this window display. It's a pretty elaborate moment that you get like right away from the film, and that makes it like really interesting to like continue on forward to see where they go from there. Because I think like at that point you're expecting it to even become a little bit more gruesome or gory or something like elaborate to it. And I think that makes it like a really interesting situation.
And I don't know if all his films open like that, but I mean,
they generally tend to.
But the ones I've seen, like they all, from Tenebrae Phenomena, they all start off with some very elaborate way of some woman getting, maimed and
brutally stabbed or something like that. Yeah.
It's not like in Friday the 13th or whatever where it's like, oh, it's a slow build, we're going to get there. It's like, no, right from the get-go, we're.
And then you have the whole aspect of the barbed wire room.
Which is ridiculous. That again, that to me, like, adds the whole. That makes at least for me, the whole theme of it being, surrounding, nightmares and dreams. That's what, how can that not be like nightmare fuel? She's, like, oh, I'm going to escape. This guy is sitting there. I've locked myself in this room. I'm actually going to escape. I'm going to get out. And then she just falls into like a giant pit of razor wire. And she dies from that.
Yeah, it's definitely...
It's literally, like, in no rationale or logical sense to why that happened. It just does.
Yeah, it's... I think, like, the barbed wire doesn't really... It's not even really meant to make sense. It's kind of just more like a... I don't know. Like a surreal moment that she just falls into a pit of barbed wire. It's like somebody ordered a massive amount of barbed wire on accident at the TAM dance hall, and... They decided to throw it in the back room because no one goes in there.
They're going to have him hop over the... Well, it's not even like a back room. It's like a pit.
Yeah, it's because it's like attached to two rooms, but it's not really
and it's not even like a trash compactor scenario or anything like that. It's just like it's like a pit of barbed wire.
Right, it doesn't...
Like I said, so it's literally like, that's like something that would only happen in a dream. Like, oh, I gotta get away, and like, oh, shit,
I fell into a whole thing of barbed wire.
How did I get into this mess? That one to me is just the most like absurd and obscene. Even going off the whole dream logic of the film.
I love that it's absurd though. I
mean, it's funny and like I enjoy it for it being absurd like that, but at the same time, again, I can go with it because the way I view this film is a giant nightmare. So.
Yeah, I love that.
So I can appreciate and enjoy the absurdity, especially compared to the rest of the scenes. Are very that involve characters getting killed are tense and brutal, like because they're very personal in the way they're handled.
Right.
This isn't. So and the way it is handled, you're right. It is absurd and
it's absurd. I mean, it does get personal a little bit towards the end there. As she's killed and she kind of is cut open, flayed as like, I guess it looks like a meatloaf, like a roast meatloaf that actually gets cut open there at the end with her neck, because you see that little, it's like almost like somebody cut into like a big beef hunk. But, it's an interesting scenario, I think. And I've always liked it for what it is, even though it's ridiculous and no one has a whole room full of barbed wire. I still liked it for what it was. But I think like, that whole, like, the whole idea of the violence being sort of like sexy or artistic in some way lends itself to this film because for the most part, this is one of Argento's like sexless and nudity-less films. One of his only ones. And so something's got to be sexy about it. So we make the violence sexy instead.
I wouldn't call the violence sexy.
I think it is.
I would say it's artistic, yes, but I don't think it's.
I've always found it to have like a intentionally sexy quality to it that's like sort of just in the way that like people who like gore would be attracted to it, and that sort of sexiness. But I don't know.
I don't have that fetish. So.
I guess not. But I've always found it to be that way. The other thing that we haven't talked about yet is the sound setup, because the sound is actually pretty important to the film itself, especially because for one thing, it's got Goblin as a soundtrack.
It's the cue to most of the moments in the film.
Yeah, it is. Like as we talked about a little bit beforehand, it's the it's our cue to enter like Suspiria's world, but it's also continually becomes like this whole thing that kind of signals like violence, because sometimes there will be a tense scene where Goblin soundtrack is playing in the background. You got the guy wailing away on like the bass as we played in our intro, and then all of a sudden like Susie will get out of that tense scenario, like she'll
instantly
like
cuts.
Yeah, she hides and cuts.
It doesn't fade. Yeah, no, it is. I will say the use of the soundtrack is good because again, it's only really played. Again, it's played at night when like things are tense and like are building to things. And I like the use of the soundtrack. However, that being said, I think this is Goblin's one of their weaker soundtracks.
Really?
Yes.
That is not how most people I think would feel about a Goblin soundtrack. And I only say that because I think that this one is at least one of Goblin's better suited tonally soundtracks to it.
No,
the mood of it is better suited.
And I agree with that. I think as a soundtrack and a score to the film,
yeah, it's
good and it's really well done. And it's good and I like it. However, that being said, just as like if I'm grading it as if I was like if I'm gonna pick like some Goblin stuff to listen to, this would not be it.
Yeah.
And I know technically they didn't, they didn't do Tenebrae, but it was members of Goblin.
Right.
I would rather listen to the stuff from Tenebrae.
Yeah.
Because just as like
as a listening thing.
Yeah, something,
Well, yeah.
Because there's like, there's like, I'm replaying it right now because I'm trophy whoring. I'm replaying The Last of Us for PS4. I would say the soundtrack is minimal, but it's well done and it's used in the right moments. I think it's it's well done and the moments that it's used, it's great. But would I ever just sit down and want to listen to it? No.
Right.
So it's I mean, so that's where I'm coming from with this. Again, I think their soundtrack for this film is good, and it totally lends itself to the film because it goes perfectly with the visual aspects and the cinematography and color and all that. It fits with it perfectly. However, like I said, like to me, like if I had to like choose listening to this or like Dawn of the Dead soundtrack, I'm listening to Dawn of the Dead.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think too, part of that is like the witch wailing. Like you're not gonna. Generally, most people don't want to sit down and hear like. It's part of your soundtrack. I think like Tenebrae soundtrack definitely has more of like just the prog rock element to it that you can just sit down and listen to.
Nice and exactly. Tenebrae's theme is
Suspiria is not really like one of those that you can just like sit down and listen to without somebody like looking over at you being like, what the fuck are you listening to? But I definitely I'm not saying that I have not done that. I actually the Synapse Films Blu-ray that I have with the Steelbook actually comes with the soundtrack on a CD, so not saying I wouldn't sit down and listen to Suspiria on the soundtrack, but I do think that like some of the other ones are more prog rocky and like just listenable as a regular album than maybe Suspiria might be.
Like you said with Tenebrae. Like Tenebrae, it's like that theme, like it has such a great synth and bass line. You could just listen to that. Like
Yeah. The funny thing about like when you say the Dawn of the Dead is I sometimes I feel like Dawn of the Dead soundtrack is ill suited for things that are happening in the film.
No,
it's so funny. Yeah.
I mean, but this, it is funny and quirky. And it is something at first when I first watched Dawn of the Dead, I didn't really care for. I mean, I liked the soundtrack, but I'm like, this doesn't fucking fit the film at all. But now, like, the whole kind of overall comedic horror elements of it. It's the same thing with like Day of the Dead too. Day of the Dead's got a Caribbean synth soundtrack, and the first time I listened to that, I was like, "What the fuck?" But now it's like it's great, and I love it, and
Yeah, it is funny how like some of these you would sit down and actually listen to, but maybe don't fit the theme of the film so well, and then other ones they fit the theme of the theme of the film really well, like Suspiria, but you might not sit down and listen to it just on its own. I think like one of the things about Suspiria 2 is that the Goblin soundtrack is like very loud. Even in this film that we watched with the Synapse Films restoration of the film that's done with the special soundtrack they made sure to get the audio correct. The Goblin soundtrack is still really fucking loud on it. And part of it is intentional. They want it to be loud and want it to be tense.
Some of the sound overall in the film, like anytime there's thunder or lightning crack, totally like way,
Yeah, it's part of the original sound design of the film. Yeah.
I think that just adds to the whole lucid, we're in a dream, it's
like sometimes because that initial part of the film where Susie can't really understand what the one girl is saying before she leaves the TAM building, is sort of like, at that distance, you would expect to be able to at least hear her a little bit or something, but...
I mean, we can't when it's first going on, because all you can hear is the fucking thunder and lightning and the rain, because, You
just hear, like, a very minimal mumbling sound. So, yeah, it does. It kind of has that, like, dream sequence element to it of, like, you can't hear things, or then you hear things really vividly. Another interesting nightmare mode to Suspiria. I don't think there's really anything else that we can say about Suspiria that hasn't truly been said before. I mean, after 40 years, this film has been really commented on over and over again. It's really become a staple of the horror genre. Obviously, it's getting a remake, and I think they announced it for November from Luca Guadagnino. And so there's not a whole lot more to say critically on this film than what's already been said before. So I guess what I have to come back to is the question that I posed to you before we did our beer break. Did you like Suspiria? And I guess this time you can actually like go a little bit more in depth to it than just saying.
Okay, so let's I'll preface it with this. So out of 10 blue irises, what would I give Suspiria?
Okay. You named your own rating scale. That's fine.
Well, because usually, that's
normally I do it. But
what would you have gone with then? No. What would you have gone with?
I didn't really think about it, so yeah. Well, out of 10 highball glasses of wine, as Udo Kier is drinking. No.
Out of 10 blondish gray thick eyebrows.
Or how about just in general loots? 10 loots for the Goblin soundtrack. No, but your irises is fine. You can go with that.
I will give it a 7.5. I think the biggest hindrance for me is the lack of a structured narrative that makes sense. I think, because we didn't really talk about it, because there was really no need to talk about any of the actors like Udo Kier and all that, because they don't really do anything outside exposition dump. And outside of Susie, who's played by Jennifer Harper, she's the only one. Jessica, my bad. Besides her, I mean, she's the only one that really has to show any emotions.
Range, yeah.
And she does fit like with her body motions and her facial expressions. Problem is that like her voice is so badly dubbed, and I know it's her own voice, but I can just imagine it coming off a lot better when she was actually acting it than the dub. Because in the dub, she sounds fucking wooden as hell.
Yeah, and I think that's like the case too. Like when we can't talk really about the actors, is that the dub is problematic. It's very wooden. The deliveries of these don't really match with like the
Which goes off of, again, why I think as a silent film, it would work really well, because you don't, everything's told visually. You don't need people to be, saying things. Just have have it all be expressed with their bodies.
Yeah.
But I think because there's a lack of a overall narrative structure, there's no real reason for you to kind of have any investment in the film other than, if you are just like a layman watching this film and you're not really into film as an art and the visual aesthetics of film, you're not going to want to see this film because you're going to be like, what the fuck's going on? You have to have some kind of curiosity going into it. And I think the premise itself is strong enough to where I, was willing to follow along into what was going on. And enjoy the film. I think, again, because it's such a visually stunning film, and it has a great soundtrack, and pretty good sound design overall that kind of use the visual and sound aspects to tell the story itself. Mm-hmm. Again, I think in that sense, it is a great form of storytelling on Argento's part by having it all expressed visually.
Yeah.
Like I said, if there was a slightly stronger narrative, I would find this film to be probably just as great as Tenebrae. Because looking back on the films I've seen by him, Tenebrae is the one I love the most, because it's not only visually stunning and has a great soundtrack, but it also has a very strong, narrative too, outside of a few quirks.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the things too when you're talking about visuals from the artists or from the actors, Alita Valli, who plays the one madam, the madam mistress there, mm-hmm. the crazy looking one.
She's like Frau Farbinissa.
She does a great job with that character simply because of her expressions, yes. Her visual expressions. Because she's super scary just from the get go of just seeing her face, and she can be super mad and still smiling through it. It's very unsettling how she does that. So I think again when you're talking about the silent aspect of it, she does a great delivery of just facial recognition of how she's feeling or how unsettling she can be. So I think it's good. So I will give the film a 9. I think it's really good. Part of it is just the nostalgia factor, how it really kind of goes into the trilogy a little bit more once we get into Inferno as well. But
I was going to say, one thing I do want to say, because your 40th anniversary steelbooks, the 4K resolution.
Yeah.
With the 4K resolution, I can't imagine seeing this film in any other level of quality. I think if you saw this film in 480p, you'd be robbing yourself of the great visual experience. And it's almost it's hard to imagine now. Imagine seeing this film in the 70s for the first time. Mm-hmm. How that print probably looks compared to this.
Yeah, and then all other prints too that I had seen prior to this, even though you could definitely tell the color was there, they definitely look muted. Certain scenes are completely changed in the way that they're presented, especially towards the end of the film as you get into that the darker aspects of it when you go to the secret room and everything. When she's back there, it's kind of dark. Those were very difficult to even make out when you were watching the other transfers of the film or the early ones where you didn't have this 4K restoration. So yeah, they did a great job with this. Interesting thing too is that Umbrella Entertainment from Australia also released a 4K restoration of Suspiria around the same time that Synapse did, and I have not seen it myself, but I know that when we did the reviews on cultsploitation.com, our other writer, Michael, did say that Umbrella Entertainment's looked great as well, although I have read that there are subtle differences between the two transfers, color schemes and things like that. So it's kind of interesting, too, how that can affect how you're viewing it. So I haven't seen the Umbrella Entertainment version of it, but I've heard that it's really great as well as a 4K transfer, just a little bit different in terms of how they restored it and what kind of colors came out. So kind of interesting how that can impact a film as well. But yeah, definitely if you haven't seen a 4K restoration of this film, check out either one of them because they're both really good and they impact how you see the film and the events that happen.
And again, as we stressed, throughout this entire podcast, it's a very visual film.
Yeah.
And I think if, you're not seeing it in the highest quality possible, you will be robbing yourself.
Do a disservice to yourself. Yeah.
And I'm not usually a stickler for those types of things, but that's like something as I was watching the film, just kind of like running through my head. I wonder what this looked like in the 70s on its original, film print. With
really stands out.
With those reds and, I imagine they're, again, very vibrant, but, much more muted, not as sad, because they are hyper saturated in this. And I think, part of the film's aesthetic charm.
Sure. So that ends our Suspiria episode. What are we doing next in 2 weeks? We have anything picked out yet?
I don't know. What do you want to do?
I'm not sure either. We can stick with the horror element. We can branch out a little, maybe do a little sci-fi. Haven't done sci-fi in a while. Something along those lines. It's hard to say. I don't know. Haven't picked it out yet. I'll probably announce it before the next episode. It won't be a surprise. And at some point, we got to do Blood and Black Lace. It would only make sense to do our namesake movie.
That'll be like an anniversary episode.
Like a 2-year anniversary or something?
Yeah.
Or 200th episode?
I would say 2 year. We're way past that.
Yeah, we are past 2 years. But 200th episode would be a good one to do.
There we go.
We got a little ways to go, but 200, we'll hit that at some point. So, all right, so we'll see you back in 2 weeks for a new episode of the podcast, which has yet to be announced. And thank you for listening. We hope you will find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or any other podcasting software that you can listen to podcasts on, and leave us a nice review and subscribe to us. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Blood and Black Rum Podcast. We're on Twitter at Blood and Black Rum. We have a patron account, so you can donate to us. If you donate $1 a month, you get our episodes early, so might be worth it to do that if you want to throw us a couple bucks to help keep the podcast running. Other than that, thanks for listening, and we'll see you back in 2 weeks.
Take care.